is Pastor Charles from Bux-Mont Baptist Church. Today, we wanted to bless you with some information and some resources to teach your children some practical life skills in this day and age with so much technology and so many different things that kids get sucked into. A lot of them aren't learning some practical things on behavior or just how to live and going off to college and having difficulties just doing some normal functions. So family and consumer sciences is something really important and something that we really encourage parents to teach their children. And we're blessed at the church to have an expert in family and consumer sciences in Mrs. Mary Wright. Thank you so much for being on today, Mrs. Mary Wright.
You're very welcome. Glad to be here.
Yeah, well, again, we're really grateful and just to have an expert in this field at the church. Mrs. Wright is a national board certified teacher. She has a bachelor's in education and home economics from Kansas State University. She also has a master's in science and instructional technology from Philadelphia University, or formerly known as Philadelphia University, is now Thomas Jefferson University, and also additional certificates from St. Joseph's, and is a state certified teacher in Kansas and Pennsylvania. Lifelong teacher, lifelong educator, and really has even won awards in this field of subjects. So it's really fantastic. I know a lot of our friends, we have 3 boys at home. We're always trying to teach them how to be responsible, teach them how to do chores and manage finances and everything like that, because really to prepare them to be productive citizens and productive people, know how to take care of themselves and know how to do different things. So it's really important. One of the first and most important thing for kids is eating. And how to eat well, how to be healthy. And, that's a big thing for family and consumer sciences as well. So, Mrs. Wright, what are some things that parents can do to help teach their kids how to eat well and how to be healthy, have healthy eating habits?
The first thing that I'm going to suggest is to always wash your hands. There is absolutely a huge benefit to washing your hands. And recommendations are that you wash them for 20 seconds. Well, often you don't want to count the 20 seconds or you don't want to pay attention to that. So what I say is that if you pay attention to what you are washing, that you will actually get it all. So like make sure you wash the palm of your hand, make sure you wash the back of your hand, make sure you wash the wrist, make sure you wash the webs of your fingers. And then the last thing I do is I tell students to take and wash their fingernails. And when you have this motion that washes, and once you're done with that, you can pretty much bet that 20 seconds has gone by if you've done all of that. So to me, it's more of that process, making sure you wash everything. The other thing that I also is very important about eating is you want to drink water. And drinking water is so important to your digestive system. There's been recommendations that you drink a glass of water before you ever eat, because that will automatically send that through your system. As far as how much water to drink, there's a lot of ideas out there, but I've heard like half of your body weight in ounces is a good guide. But there's other ideas out there as to how much water to drink. When it comes to choosing foods, the healthiest food that you can eat is going to be the original form. An apple is a good example. To eat an apple is the absolute healthiest way for you to eat an apple. You bite into it, you actually sit there and chew those. Your body knows exactly what to do with that apple. As soon as you take and slice that apple into a different kind of shape or form, you have already changed how your body is going to digest that apple.
Mm.
And that's a little bit difficult to understand, and I'm not going to go into a lot of detail as to what happens, but you can imagine the difference between a whole apple and applesauce. Applesauce does not digest the same way that the original apple did. And so as long as you think of eating the food in its most original form and keep that in mind, and then for each process that you use after that, you know that you are actually changing how your body is going to digest that. Some
That's
other,
some that's some great initial tips as well. I've heard before some people say, sing happy birthday 2 times when you're washing your hands to do it. Well, I've seen kids sing happy birthday pretty quickly, so
yeah, yeah,
it's not 20 seconds when they're doing that. And then also to your point as well, my sister is a ER doctor, and that's the way they wash their hands. With all those different components and between their fingers, fingernails, and everything like that. And so focusing on in that way is some really great advice. So that's fantastic. And then also related to the food, yeah, I'm hearing that over and over again from a lot of different sources is just eat whole natural foods. And I think uh, we as a society have kind of learned that all these processed foods and fortified cereals that everyone was kind of living off of for a number of years isn't really what's best for the body. So that's another great advice, related to eating habits and healthy eating in general. Are there any other tips related to eating and food habits that you have for parents?
yes, absolutely. You have, when you look at, well, first of all, you want to try to minimize how much processed food that you do eat. And one of the ways you can check yourself is to limit how many ingredients you will allow on the ingredient list of that package. So if you say, okay, I'm going to limit the number of ingredients to, I like to advise to not go below 5 to begin with, because you're going to find that that's pretty difficult to find packages that have 5 or fewer. That does not include spices, by the way. Those are not the kind of things that you would include in that in that kind of a number. But you can also go down to something like three ingredients, and that's very difficult to find unless you make it yourself. So it's always nice to start somewhere and say, I'm going to at least look at the ingredients on the package and see what it is I am eating, feeding my family, or what the kids are eating, that sort of thing. And then if you start limiting that, you can find that there's, you're going to go through some, there's still potato chips you can buy. There's still cookies you can buy. It's very interesting. It's just that you have to look, or you have to decide that you can make them yourself. And then you can control that much easier when you make it yourself. Let's see, I also wanted to focus on family mealtime. Family mealtime is so very important. It is a cohesiveness to the family that just is not, it's like every member of the family will benefit from that. It's not just the adults, it's not just the teenage kids, it's not even the toddlers will benefit from having that mealtime. It's a good idea to also include the children in the planning of that meal, whether it's nothing more than having them put the decoration in the center of the table and to have that decoration at the center of the table for them. Even if it's nothing more than having them go and give them a recipe and say, go see if we have these ingredients. Just make them part of that process. Make them part of that planning. They don't have to necessarily be the ones to go to the grocery store, because then your cart gets full because they always want additional things. But even that can be helpful when they help you make the list, and they can be the ones to go and find some of those things.
Yeah, there's that just to that point, I was really convicted about 6 years ago about the amount of family meals we were having together because I was working so much. And then I read this book called Alone Together by Sherry Turkle. And in there, she said that the amount of family meals eaten together is the number one indicator of a child's success.
Yes.
And she's a secular author. It wasn't a Christian or religious book at all. But she said when you look at children's success, the amount of meals they eat together as a family is the number one indicator of how successful they're going to be. I'm not sure exactly how she defined success in the book, but it really convicted me. And since that time, we always have tried to have at least one meal together as a family per day, either breakfast or dinner because I just it's such important family time. There's the discussion, being able to talk about the day, find out what's going on in their life, and as a Christian family as well, just the opportunity to pray together and raise them up in that way too. So that's great advice as well.
And the other part to this is it is absolutely important that dad be at those meals. Dad has a very strong influence in the family's eating habits, more so than any other member of the family does. Hmm. And there is statistics to show that it definitely falls on dad's shoulders. And it's something that may not always be possible. And I think most families that would at least try to have dad there, I think would be, even if dad couldn't be there all the time, I think they would still see the benefit. Because I realize busy lives sometimes don't make that kind of thing possible.
And that's what we found too. At that period of time, and even now, I work a lot and do a lot of different things, but we shifted our schedule to make that meal happen. We moved breakfast up an hour and, just moved the morning routine up earlier so we could sit down and have that meal together at that period of time. And so, and now we shift. And so just making a cognizant effort to do that. And yeah, for sure. So that's great.
And breakfast is a very important meal. It is also a meal that it could even be a sit-down meal with everybody there. It doesn't have to be a run-in type of thing. I mean, that might mean everybody going to bed a little bit early at night to be able to accommodate getting up in the morning and have them with their eyes open at the table. But it can be done.
Great. Other things related to eating habits? I know it's such a broad topic. There's a lot there, but you've given us a lot of good information as well. Any other thoughts related to eating habits?
That kind of covers some of the things that I had wanted to cover.
Yeah, fantastic. Related to eating habits, there's a big component is cooking. Right? Family and consumer science is preparing meals. You're talking about the different ingredients inside things as well. I was shocked the other day. I bought some Triscuits, and there's only 3 ingredients in Triscuits. So that was neat. And there's a couple cereals that are trying to do that now as well. But as you said, it's good to limit the processed food. We can't eat raw whole foods all the time. Some people do that as a diet, but what are some ways that parents can prepare their children, and it might be, children who are a little bit older, to act when they get out on their own, that they'll be able to know how to cook and prepare meals, because we don't want our kids to grow up and be eating fast food or out every meal of the day, because there's so much salt and fat and things like that. So I guess, what is a good age to teach kids how to cook, and what are some practical ways to do that?
Well, the absolute first one is you make sure that they are also part of the cleanup. So no matter what they cook, no matter what they do, they need to be part of the process of cleaning up. That is, it's not meant to be a negative thing. It's just meant to let them know, that this is, you make, you eat, and you clean up. I love to encourage kids to cook. Absolutely. At all ages. I would do it as soon as they would be able to even have the motor skills of being able to layer like things on a sandwich, that sort of thing. I would have them do those things with you, for you, at the table, before, just be part of that. Just give them a little something to do. I would say at the age of 8, they should be able to boil water. And they should know what boiling water looks like. It's not the little bubbles. It's, I always use the phrase angry. You want the water to look angry. If the water looks angry, then you know you've reached that point. An 8-year-old should be able to understand that and know what that would look like. One thing that we now, because of COVID, and I see this as a blessing actually, Zoom is a wonderful way to have an experience with a child and an adult, and having Zoom lessons on cooking. Have the child have the same ingredients that the person, like I think grandmother and grandchild, they both have time, they share the recipe, they make sure they have time to go get the ingredients. Once they get the ingredients, then they set up a time when they're going to actually make it together. And they will both make the same thing. And even if it's to the point where you will sit and eat it together afterwards, or if it's just something that you just help them prepare, and they're going to, maybe it has to go in the refrigerator for a while and they're going to eat later, that sort of thing. That also, but I love the Zoom part of this, because it does help with the boredom that the children can sometimes have, and mom needs to do something, but you don't have, like maybe mom has to go onto her computer and has to go do some work for a few hours. What am I going to do with the kid? Find somebody that will have that kind of an experience with your child during that time, and that totally engages them. They will, it's a very good experience for both grandma and the grandkid, who older, younger. They can even be teenagers, and you get your friend and let's do this together, and you can set something like that up. So Zoom has been very good with being able to do that sort of thing. One of my biggest safety concerns with cooking does have to do with knives. And I suppose I would probably put it at about age 10, where I would let a child actually chop something for me, would be about age 10. The absolute biggest rule that I have is that when you are chopping, your eyes are on the knife, and you don't look at anything. You don't talk to anybody and look at them. You make sure that your eyes stay on the knife. And that rule, you will never have a knife accident when you have that rule. And if they're going to look up, that knife has to lay down. So to me, for a child, and in my experience, I would have up to 36 students in the class at one time, and they each would have a knife. And I had to be able to trust the entire class with 36 knives, so that it was one of those things where I would know that if I turned my back to one section of the room, I knew the other section of the room was still following my rules. And so that was, they were very good at it. They knew that if they didn't follow that rule, they had to leave the kitchen. And so that was kind of, it's something that I insist on when I have students or grandkids in front of me that are using knives.
That's a great tip. Just always keep your eye on the blade. I remember when I was a kid, I was whittling a piece of wood with a knife. I don't recall exactly if I took my eyes off the knife or not, but I know I wasn't being super safe with it. And I cut my hand real bad, so knife accidents can happen pretty easily with young kids. I was a little bit surprised about the age 8 and the boiling water. Um, when they boil water, is it more teaching them how to boil water, and or is it them actually like preparing macaroni or something like that? What do you suggest in terms of the age 8 and the boiling water? How to teach that in a safe way, and is there other things related to that?
Well, I definitely would teach them how to boil the water. Every stove is different, but you definitely teach them that you're putting it on the hottest setting to get it to boil. And so when you want to do that, you also have to make sure that you're not going to burn yourself. And I like to start with the boiling of the pasta. One of the first things that I would teach a child would be to boil pasta. And most children like mac and cheese. And so that's always one that's an easy one to teach them how to boil the water, how to put the pasta in there, how to let it come back to boil. Because see, it will go, the boiling will go away. So you have to teach them, you need to get it to come back to that angry look. And and then to also, it teaches them the timing of it, because I require them to set the timer. And so they have to set the timer. And then of course, what to do with that hot water when you're done. Because at that point, I would recommend, if it's the first time that the 8-year-old has done this, and probably even after that, till they became comfortable with it, I would have the adult be the one that would drain the water off. It's not something that I would expect an 8-year-old to be able to take that pan and bring it over to the sink and dump out the boiling water. So that part, but it's still, as they get older and more confident in what the stove is doing and what the water is doing, they will become more confident in the fact that they can do that. I mean, it also brings up the point with opening up the oven. Once you have the oven turned on, and if the oven is turned on to 350 and you open up that door, you've got the heat from the oven coming at you. And I tell kids that they are not supposed to stand right in front of the oven. You go to one side or the other, whichever one is more convenient, and you open it from the side and let the air come straight out. And then you never reach in there without something in your hand, not a dish towel. It has to
Yeah,
be,
fire.
because if there's any moisture in the dish towel at all, it will scald you. And so they must use a pot holder of some sort to be able to get something hot out of there. And again, to do that, at age 8, I would be a little bit concerned to have them do it by themselves, but to teach them how to pull that rack out and to be able to lift it up. It'd be good for them to have seen it done many times before they ever tried that. And I would go more for an age 10 for that, to go working on an oven like that.
Yeah, what I really like about the approach, Mrs. Wright, is just the holistic nature of it. You talked about cleaning as part of good eating habits, the preparation, teaching the kids how to boil water, and when they're cutting things as well. The safety part of it is it's not just the preparation of the food or the meals or the eating, but also the cleaning before, preparing it in a safe way, eating healthy meals, and then also cleanup. So I really appreciate that approach with family and consumer sciences, and the approach you're instructing and giving advice towards, because it really helps kids grow into adults that can function in all regards, instead of just one way. And it's just a great habit to clean up right after you're done eating as well. So the things don't sit around. So great stuff.
It's not, generally speaking, the children don't need to, they'll come up with creative ideas of what to cook. You don't necessarily have to give them those creative ideas as much as you need to teach them those basics. And there's so many things online that I find that children like to watch cooking shows. They like to see that competition with other kids is one example. And it's, to me, that's, the focus is more being able to manage the things in the kitchen and being able to get around safely, because the ideas will come. They'll go, you know, can you get, or they'll find a recipe themselves and go, I'd like to make that.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a great point. Manage the things in the kitchen and get around safely.
The other thing too that you will also notice is that if a child has a dislike for a certain food, if they are the ones to use that food in the preparation, they will often learn to like it, because they never realized that that there was a way maybe to season it to where they would like it, that sort of thing. It's so that also helps in their likes and dislikes. I don't worry too much about the likes and dislikes, because we all change our likes and dislikes as life goes on. It takes about 7 years for the surface of your tongue to rejuvenate. And in that process, your likes and dislikes will change just based on how it feels on your tongue.
Yeah, that's interesting. It always perplexed me when people, you know, become adults and even, you know, as they get older and they say, oh, I've never liked this. And, you know, I'm like, give it a try. You know, there's plenty of things I didn't like when I was younger that I love now. So that's a great point as well.
Never give up.
Yeah, and not to get too stuck on, you know, preferences, but really just managing the kitchen, being safe, and knowing how to prepare meals. What are some other important, you know, jobs or chores that it's really good to instruct children on, and what are some of the ages that we should begin to teach these other life skills?
There are people out there with degrees that I can't even pronounce that will tell you that jobs and chores should start at age 3, and that they can be very simple jobs. You would then, as they get more mature, you would definitely change the kind of job that they can do. If you follow that, by the time they are 18, like there are some, you'll find some researchers that have actually segmented those jobs into like 3 to 5, 5 to 7. I saw one where it said by age 7, they should be able to, at age 3, they were having them just take and pull the blanket over their bed. Even though it wouldn't look neat, they had made that attempt to pull the blanket over their bed and the pillow, and that's called making the bed. At age 5, it should look different. At age 5, that should actually look like a made bed. At age 7, they claim that a child should be able to strip the sheets and linens off the bed and make that bed when you put it back. I don't have any one of my children that could do that at age 7 or did that. Whether they could or couldn't, it didn't happen. So you see a lot of information out there on what age groups, but what they do say is that it's so important that they learn to do tasks of any kind, whether it's going to be laundry. Maybe you have them, give them the job of sorting by color. Is it possible that you might change what they did when they're done? It's possible, but it would be something that you might point out to them. You know, this doesn't belong here. Can you figure out why? Why would I pull this one out and say it's not where it belongs? You could have them turning some clothes inside out. It's a benefit to our clothes if we wash them inside out, because you don't put the rubbing of the machine itself, the friction, you don't put it on the outside, you put it on the other side. And most stains come from the outside in, and so you want to take and push the stains out. And so that's another reason you want to turn your clothes inside out to wash them. At age 8, they were saying that you should be able to have them thread a needle. They should be able to thread a needle. They should be able to repair a hole in their clothes, which is an interesting, because that takes some fine motor skills. But at age 8, they're claiming that that could actually be something that they could do.
Yeah, they sell a bunch of different kits as well, where you could teach your kids how to sew, and the needles aren't as sharp. But sew a little stuffed animal or things like that. We bought one or a couple for our boys, I think a year or so ago, and they still have those little stuffed animals, and they're so proud how they sewed them together. So.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. By the time they are, if you keep increasing the difficulty of what they are to grow into and keep challenging them at each step, by the time they turn 18, they will be able to run a household. And that's something that we don't always strive for with our children, is to get them to that place where they can be on their own when they leave. We sometimes try to maybe rush it at the end, but what I'm saying is if you spread it out and have them, do it in stages and steps, that way it does end up helping a lot with things like when they get to a certain point and you can trust them to be able to go into the kitchen and do some meal prep, maybe even fix an entire meal. Like give them that job of, once a week, you're going to make one thing for the Friday night meal, and have them be a part of that. That also, as time goes on, they will be able to make the entire meal, and that will take some pressure off of maybe a busy adult schedule, so that the adults can then focus on, well, we want to all be together when we eat that meal, but they don't have to necessarily be there to do the preparations for it.
Yeah, that's great. Great information, having them do different things as they grow and teaching them, holistically how things go together, clothes, washing clothes, sewing, just different practical skills. You mentioned being able to manage a household when they're 18 years old. And one of the major components of managing a household is the finances. And that's a big issue for a lot of people today, especially, with credit cards and things like that. It's online shopping, and it's when you have cash in your hand, you know exactly how much you can spend, and you have a little bit better grasp on that. But unfortunately, a lot of people don't have that. Even the balancing checkbooks like that previous generations would do. A lot of younger folks don't have those skills. So related to money management, what are some good techniques to teach kids on how to manage their money?
The first thing that they have to learn, and it's probably the best thing that you teach a child, is that you never spend more than what you have. You don't borrow from your brother or your sister. You don't borrow from mom and dad. You spend only what you have and what you make and what you have been given. Maybe there's an allotment that mom and dad are setting you towards. It is beneficial to start at a very young age. And again, just like you do the managing of the household, you want to increase that increment so that when they turn 18, they probably have some they have at least the skills to manage it. Whether they necessarily have the money, how do I want to say this? They don't necessarily have to be spending the money on the groceries, but they need to have at least something available so that when they do step out of that household, they have that money there that they can take from. And the best way to start this is to start with what I call the envelope system. And you will see a lot of resources that will send you in that regard, send you in that direction. When they are young, and I would start I would at least have it in place by age 8. I think you can actually put it in sooner than that, but age 8 is where that concept of money seems a little more real to them because they know it takes money to get things. And one of the things that I would have is have them start with 2 envelopes. One would be a savings envelope, one would be a spending envelope. Whether that spending is going to be on certain things or whether you are going to add a 3rd envelope, like some people, giving is another category that I would very quickly put in there. So you'd have a saving and a giving one would be required. The child doesn't get to choose what you do with those 2 other than save or give. But then you have that 3rd one where they can have some decisions. They get to make the decision of what to spend that on. How to get that money is a bit controversial because some people don't like the idea of allowances. I do believe that money should be available to them somehow, whether you decide to give them a certain amount, no matter how good or bad they are. Everybody's going to have their own ideas of how to get the money to the child. I like the idea of having them, you're doing chores for us because you're supposed to, and we are going to, I don't like the idea of saying, well, if you don't do your chores, you're not going to get the money. I like the idea of separating that because the money has to be something that they have to learn to manage anyhow, and so do the chores. If they're not doing their chores, that's another problem that I would deal with separately. I wouldn't deal with that in regard to their chores. Even though there is that concept out there that if you go to work, you're going to get paid, or to get paid, you have to do the work either way. And I just try to separate that in the idea of a family because everything is important for them to learn. So if one is suffering, deal with what's suffering. Don't make the other one suffer also. So both the chores and the money would suffer. Okay. So
what we do, and again, as you said, there's a lot of different ways to do it. You could read a million different ways. We have set chores that they do and they don't get paid for. They have to do no matter what. And then we have optional chores.
okay.
And if they do those, then they get paid and they know exactly how much they'll get paid to do those chores. And that's how, and then same thing, we have the 3 envelopes where there's set amounts, but then there's that discretionary money they could put in spend, save, or give. And it's amazing that their mindset very early was, well, I really don't want to buy anything right now. I want to buy something big later, so I'm going to save this. And so they would save and, put a lot more in save and give than we even mandated. So it's great information and we found it to be great and very encouraging. Kids surprise us all the time, what they pick up and what they actually do. So.
Yeah. And the thing about the savings one is that, again, there's a lot of ideas about the saving one because you could tell them, don't spend out of that one. If there's, that one is something that maybe you want to save, like even when you turn, like even for college, you could even look at it as something like that, that it's a little easier for them to understand that if I save it and I'm wanting to buy something big with it, that can be done. But I wouldn't I would encourage them to eventually get to the idea, okay, I know I'm going to need a car. I know I'm going to need someplace to live. I'm going to have some of this savings money to go towards that too. One of the things that it also does is it takes away some of the arguments that you might have about money with your kids. One of the things that, I know this is going to sound funny, but with my kids, they would always complain about the toothpaste I would buy because I would buy the one I could afford. They wanted the one that had all the little Looney Tunes on them or whatever on them, the toothbrushes, everything like that. So what I did was I actually created a category, an envelope for them for toothpaste. And so they had to put a certain part of their, what I would give, because I would give an allowance. And so a certain portion of that would have to go into that toothpaste fund. And so when we went to go buy toothpaste, when they would run out of toothpaste, so the kids each had their own tube of toothpaste. They would go buy their own. And there was never an argument. It just totally took the argument out of the equation because they would then, once the toothpaste thing was settled, then we got into, there was a situation where we were, my son just loved this one brand of jeans. He had to have them. I said, well, you're going to create a category that's going to ask for those jeans then. Because I said, I'm not spending $80 on a pair of jeans for a 12-year-old. And so he would do, it was important enough to him that he wanted to set up that category to be able to do that. And of course, that would mean that some of the others would fluctuate because, then you can't put as much into some of the other envelopes. I always made sure that the giving one was always 10%. That one was never allowed to change. I also never allowed the savings one to change. So those two had to both be at 10%. That's just the way I did it. But it was one of those things where any of the others, you can do whatever you want with them.
Yeah, that's great. Well, Mrs. Wright, this is all some great information. You covered a lot of subjects today, a lot that parents can grow and learn from and teach their kids, related to eating and chores and money management as well. And also, you provided some additional links and resources that we'll put inside the description of the video, so you could look down there and get more information on how to teach your children practical life skills. So thanks so much for being on today. We really appreciate it.
You're welcome.